Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
Between the end of March and the end of April, everyone who drove taxis, checked tickets on buses, and helped with luggage on trains called Catherine Miss. This was because of Christopher's influence on her. Without him, she thought, they might have called her Mother. Without Christopher, she would have felt very sad and lonely. She was cut off from Virginia, who didn't read her letters and sent them back. This made Catherine feel like a sad old lady, but Christopher made her feel happy and loved. He called her sweet names and made her feel beautiful. She thought that love was very important. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw that she looked happier and younger after visiting Chickover. Her friends were amazed by how much happier and younger Catherine looked after her visit to Chickover. They had been worried that the visit would be difficult for her, but she came back looking so different that they could hardly believe their eyes. Led by the Fanshaws, Catherine's friends decided that she was too lovely to stay single. They thought she should find a rich husband quickly. They planned a series of dinners where Catherine would meet different rich men, but their plans didn't work out. Most rich men were already married, too old, or too sick, and Catherine refused to go to the dinners. She refused to go anywhere, not even answering the phone, and was never home. In mid-April, her friends couldn't find her because she was busy planning her marriage to Christopher. The plans were simple. Christopher would move into her flat, and they would have enough money to live comfortably. Catherine didn't care about becoming rich. She kept the plans secret from her friends because she was afraid they would be surprised. No one could have been more surprised than Catherine. She tried to keep their relationship as just friends, but Christopher's determination was too strong. He didn't listen to her reasons for not marrying, like their age difference or Stephen's disapproval. Instead, he looked at her with pity, like she was a child disobeying its parents. At night, Catherine worried about the future. She didn't want to harm Christopher or ruin his life. She knew they weren't a good match because he was reckless and she needed to be sensible. But every morning, when Christopher came back to her, her worries disappeared. His love was passionate and filled with hope, unlike anyone she had known before. Christopher's love swept her away into a world where wisdom didn't matter, only love did. Why worry about age if it doesn't bother either of them? No one would notice their age difference anyway. Christopher's love made her feel young, and she believed she would always feel young with him. She used to think love couldn't do much, but now she realized it was miraculous. Even if she did start to age, Christopher would be used to her by then and might not even notice. One day, tired of arguing, Catherine agreed to marry him in a sudden, reckless moment. They got married at the registrar's office, with Mrs. Mitchum and Lewis as witnesses. Lewis was upset, and the marriage certificate showed their ages. Catherine, a widow of 47, and Christopher, a bachelor of 25. To Christopher, it felt like heaven, but Catherine just thought of it as a peaceful trip to the Isle of Wight. Until now, Catherine cared for Christopher, but she wasn't deeply in love with him. It was a content state, comforting and secure. While he was head over heels for her, she only had affection for him. He shared his feelings, and she appreciated his affection, which eased her worries about Chickover, Stephen, and Virginia. He praised her so much that she felt really good about herself. She smiled even when she slept. But deep down, she didn't feel profoundly changed. If she had to compare, she'd say her love for him wasn't much different from the love she had for Virginia. Both were strong loves, just different. She figured love was love. There wasn't much more to it. After getting married, Catherine discovered something new. You could not only love someone but also fall head over heels in love with them, a completely different feeling, she realized with some unease. Christopher had mentioned early on, when they used to argue, that falling in love was contagious. She hadn't caught it from him during their courtship, but she did during their honeymoon. She fell deeply in love in a way that both amazed and frightened her. So, this was what people meant by passion, she thought. It had been there in music, making her cry, and in poetry, making her shiver, but only rarely in the long, empty years of her life. Now it had gripped her completely. Was it pain or joy? It was definitely joy, but joy so intense that the slightest setback could turn it into agony. It felt like heaven, but with the smallest imperfection, it could become hell. How would she handle it? She wondered, staring in disbelief at these overpowering new emotions, if Christopher's love for her ever diminished. There were no half measures now, she realized, no middle ground. It was either all brightness or, terrifyingly, all darkness. They rented a small house by the sea, between St. Lawrence and Blackgang. The house overlooked the sea, and there was a meadow full of buttercups across the road. A woman from St. Lawrence helped them during the day, and at night they had the house, a tiny garden, the quiet road, the whispering pine trees, and the murmuring sea all to themselves. These were the days when Catherine felt poetic. She whispered to herself and to Christopher that he had brightened her life like turning on a lamp in a dark room, a beautiful lamp with a silver stem and a flame the color of a rose's heart. Christopher responded with the enthusiasm typical of newlyweds, and they both felt like they were in heaven. They never imagined such happiness was possible. It was like a sudden realization of what life could truly be when filled with love. Catherine loved him passionately and thought of nothing and no one else in the world. Experiencing this love late in her life felt like being swept away into blissful agony. Christopher believed he had always known that if he could awaken her from her slumber, she would be an amazing lover. They were very serious and hardly ever laughed. They spoke quietly because passion often whispers. For 3 days on that peaceful island, where the Easter tourists had left and the summer tourists hadn't arrived yet, they enjoyed each other's company. They explored the sea, the woods, and the fields of buttercups. The sun warmed them during the day, and the stars twinkled at night, and their happiness never waned. Usually, The third day of a honeymoon is crucial, but since they had never been on honeymoons before, Catherine didn't even consider her trip with George a honeymoon. They didn't know it. Christopher, being young, didn't notice the significance of the third day, and they remained blissfully happy. On the fourth morning, Christopher had breakfast alone because Catherine was still sleeping. He had asked the woman not to disturb her. After breakfast, he went into the garden with his pipe and leaned on the gate, gazing at the sea. Suddenly, he felt a strong urge to be alone with his thoughts for a couple of hours. If that wasn't possible, he thought he might enjoy playing golf, getting some exercise outdoors, and spending time with another man. He wondered where the golf course was. Maybe he could meet a friend there. Catherine didn't play golf, and he preferred it that way. He wanted some time with another man, just walking around without much talk, maybe swearing a bit if needed, knowing all the while that he would return to his wife, his own wife, when he was done. Or perhaps he'd like to swim in the sea for a while, then dry off in the sun and take a brisk walk along the cliffs, where the wind blew fresh and cheerful little larks sang. Catherine didn't swim or walk like that, and he preferred it that way. He wanted to be alone for a bit, just so he could enjoy coming back to his own wife even more. He went back inside and quietly upstairs to check on Catherine. He wanted to tell her he was thinking of going for a quick run. When he softly opened the door and saw her still asleep, he couldn't resist kneeling by the bed and giving her a kiss. She opened her eyes, smiled warmly at him, and he couldn't help but wrap his arm around her. They began whispering sweetly to each other with their faces close together on the pillow. He stayed at home that day. In the afternoon, they lounged in the field together and read poetry. She suggested it, but he didn't feel like it. He wanted to be alone with his thoughts. As they read, she noticed that he seemed to be reading differently, almost as if he didn't want to. She couldn't understand why, because he loved poetry so much. "Is something bothering you, Chris?" she asked, leaning over him with a concerned look on her face. He gently held her face in his hands and said, "I love you." He noticed how tired she looked in the afternoon light. Concerned, he asked, "Are you okay, my dear?" He kept holding her face. "Yes, I'm fine." "Why?" she replied, a bit puzzled. Then she quickly added, pulling away slightly, "Do I look tired?" "You seem pale," he said, observing her closely. "I don't feel pale," she replied, turning her head away so he could only see her profile. She tried to laugh, but she didn't like Christopher asking if she felt unwell. It made her think she must look tired, and she really didn't want to look tired, especially not now, not on their honeymoon, not married to Christopher, not ever. Looking tired was the last thing she wanted, and she wanted to avoid it at all costs. "I really don't feel pale at all," she repeated, trying to laugh, but still keeping her face turned away from him and the bright sunlight. "Inside, anyway, I feel great." She stood up suddenly. "Let's go for a walk, Chris dear," she said, brushing off the buttercups he had put on her dress. We haven't had a good long walk since we arrived. Are you sure you're not too tired? He asked, getting up as well. Tired? Not at all. To prove it to him, she set off at a fast pace and climbed over the gate into the road before he could even reach her to help. But she was tired. Even though the brisk walk and climb made her warm and hid her tiredness, when she was in her room getting ready for the evening meal and the warmth had faded from her cheeks, she was shocked by her appearance. She looked awful. Her face seemed to be sagging with exhaustion. The corners of her mouth looked sad. Her eyes seemed sunken under dark circles. And she was so pale. She stared at herself in horror, remembering the friendly bus conductors and taxi drivers who had been smiling at her and calling her Miss just a week ago. She also remembered how she looked in the mirror back then, radiant with the cool happiness of not being in love, with the satisfaction of having someone deeply in love with her, while she loved him enough but not too much, and she could easily pass for being really young. Being really young. Oh, what a wonderful thing it would be to be married to Christopher and really young. The lamp in the cottage was like all lamps in cottages, glaring unpleasantly. There was only one, and it was now in the living room, standing on the table during meals. It had a white glass shade, and who older than 25 could stand the harsh light from a lamp with a white glass shade after a long, hot, uphill walk? Even in her bedroom, lit up only by 2 flickering candle flames, she looked exhausted. So, what would she look like downstairs, facing Christopher's searching eyes and that unbearable lamp? It was as she had feared. He did stare at her, first with obvious concern and curiosity, and later, sneakily, because she couldn't hide that she didn't want her fatigue noticed. At the beginning of their relationship, she used to laugh when he said she looked tired, saying she wasn't tired at all, and it was just her age that made her seem so. She was honest and relaxed about it. She didn't care at all. But now she couldn't laugh. She found she couldn't even mention age with the same carefree attitude she had at the beginning. She rushed through the meal, getting up before he had finished, and went to stand by the open window, gazing at the stars. "What's wrong, my love?" Christopher asked anxiously, pushing his plate away and joining her. "It's such a beautiful night. Let's turn off that silly lamp, and then we can see the stars. But then we won't see each other. Do we need to?" That made sense. Why see each other when you can feel each other's presence? They turned off the lamp and sat by the open window, breathing in the sweet night air, filled with the sense of wet grass and the sea. In the darkness, she seemed fine again, and he spoke tenderly to her, holding her close, talking about their happiness, their love, and the wonderful life they would have together. She listened, snuggling up to him, loving him intensely, pushing away thoughts of her reflection in the mirror, that scary image, the face she would see every day soon as she got a little older, or whenever she felt tired, nervous, or upset. But she wouldn't be tired or nervous. In this safe haven with Christopher, What could possibly worry her? She promised herself she'd take excellent care of herself now that she meant so much to someone so precious, ensuring she stayed healthy and strong. Nerves had never troubled her before. She'd always had a sunny, peaceful mind and body. Why would she even think about such things? Perhaps those strange thoughts had crept in because of the odd feelings she had on that fourth day of happiness, feeling jittery, on edge. Every little noise or sudden movement startled her. Her body felt oddly tingly, as if it were exposed and sensitive, and her skin felt prickly, as if it were rubbed the wrong way. Plus, for no apparent reason, she felt like crying several times that afternoon. She shook off those silly thoughts. It was all in her head. Here was Christopher, so real, so dear, so near. She wrapped her arm around his neck, lifting herself a bit higher, resting her cheek against his. "I never knew it was possible to be this happy," she whispered, clinging to him. "My beloved," he whispered back, holding her tightly. Their whispers continued, filling the night with their love.